Hi, this is Dorie Clark. I am here with Newsweek, and this is our weekly interview show, Better. I'm so pleased to be here with Phil Libin. Phil is the co founder of Evernote, and he also is the CEO now of his amazing new company, which is pioneering video technology for much better online conferencing and conversations. And so we want to hear all about that, as well as his experiments with remote and hybrid work. So, Phil, it's such a pleasure to have you.
So nice to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. And welcome to everyone who's tuning in. Please feel free to type your name into the chat box and let us know who you are, where you're dialing in from, and any questions that you have for Phil. We'd love to hear what they are. So, Phil, in the midst of a pandemic, you have created this company. This is a time, of course, when people in unprecedented numbers were piling onto the web and web conferencing, and obviously, there were some limitations to that. What was the opportunity that you saw, and how did you attempt to make things better for all of these legions of huddled masses that were suddenly spending 14 hours a day on video calls?
Well, we got started on really as a joke. It was just a couple of months after the pandemic started. It was, we started working on it in May, and we'd been locked down for a couple of months, and everything was just kind of dull and depressing, and meetings weren't very effective because we were all forced to be on video, and so we just started goofing around. We were just playing around with backgrounds and gifs and just trying to make people smile a little bit, and really didn't intend to take it seriously as a product. But then there was a moment where I was asked to teach a class on entrepreneurship metrics, kind of startup metrics, and so, it's a class that I've taught a lot before, like back in the real world. But I didn't want to do it online because I thought it'd be really boring. Like no one wanted to see me, talk about show slides in a little box on Zoom. So I was going to cancel it, but then I thought, well, we're probably going to be locked up for a year or two. Can't cancel everything. So I instead of trying to make my video class kind of similar to what it would have been live, I just redid it. I redid everything, thinking, okay, well, what would I do if it was just native to video? And I used this really early version of to present it, and I had slides that I was flying around in and pointing to stuff in my head and some cheesy effects, and it was really good. And I thought it was a significantly better experience than what watching me teach in person would have been. And that's kind of when we had that glimpse. We're like, oh, well, actually, maybe all this video stuff, it isn't just a short-term way to get through the pandemic. Maybe it's actually a permanent way to give people some communication superpowers. And that's kind of how it came to be.
I love it. I love it. And you're practicing what you preach here, popping that up there. So it's true. We do need something a little different and better for much of the video communication that we do now, which I think most of us feel has gotten a little bit repetitive. And so a question that I have: you have been forming this company, and obviously if you are creating a product that's centered around video communication, it's important to walk the talk. And I understand that you have been really taking a lot of steps and putting a lot of thought into creating a hybrid workforce, that some of your employees are remote, and I guess not all of them are. How do you think that through and maintain a company culture? This is a question a lot of people are facing as we go back to work. What does that actually look like?
Well, so I mean, I guess the first thing is this: it's no one is remote. This is kind of a big rule for us because I think remote kind of means this. Remote is it always connotes some kind of disadvantage. Other people are gathered together and having fun, and you're kind of isolated. So we're not remote at all. We're distributed, and the difference between that is intentionality. I think we were remote in the beginning when we were all forced to, without any preparation, to scatter and work from home. But now that we've kind of had time to design it intentionally, we've designed our company to be fully distributed, kind of like the internet is designed to be a distributed system. So, like the people who invented the internet, they made it distributed not because they didn't know about how to make centralized networks, right? Like obviously, several things about the internet would be easier if there was one big computer somewhere that was running it, but that doesn't make any sense because the internet is being distributed is what gives it superpowers. So they've chosen to build a distributed system, and we've chosen to build a distributed company. And it makes certain things a little bit harder, but it really makes a lot of things much easier. And we spend more time focusing on kind of on the new superpowers that being distributed gives us that we could never have before, we could never touch before, stuff that we're never giving up because it's mind-blowingly powerful. And, a little bit of time trying to solve the extra problems that being distributed gives us. But focusing on the superpowers makes solving the problems worthwhile.
I love that. That's really cool. And so I understand that a new policy that you have in place, that you have recently started giving employees a stipend so that they can actually take steps to create their ideal work environment at home. What was the thinking behind that, and how has that played out for you?
Well, not necessarily at home. I think this is another misconception, right? It's that people think that being distributed means working at home, and it doesn't. The important thing is actually out of office. It's actually this is the the out of office lifestyle. Uh, what's important is that when people say, "Where am I working?" What's important is where I'm not working. I'm not working in this like centralized office where I've had to, wake up 2 hours earlier than I would have wanted to, so I could sit in traffic for 2 hours. So I could be in the same physical location with a bunch of other people who don't really want to be there for 10 hours, so that I could sit in traffic for 2 hours on the way back. The office was the problem. So once you go out of office permanently, you can choose where to work from. So sometimes I work from home. Like right now, I'm at home. I'm in my home studio because where I'm doing this broadcast, and I wanted to have nice microphones and lights, and I've got that set up at home. But about a third of the time, I'm working from here. About a third of the time, I walk to a museum. I work for a museum, which is amazing. I like go for walks either by myself or with a coworker if there's someone here in person. Whenever we need to kind of puzzle out something important, something creative, there's no better place than being surrounded by art and creativity to do that. Sometimes I work from the pool. There's a great club here that has an amazing pool and nice showers and changing rooms and lounges. And so if I don't have to do like video recordings, then I'll go work from the club. I'll do some Zoom calls and then swim a few laps in the pool and then do some more Zoom calls. And I'd never be able to do this before. Like back in the before times, I'd never like go to the pool in the middle of the day from work. But now I can work from there. And so what we've done is we've set up this. Our philosophy is, before in the before times when we had offices, we had for all turtles, we had offices in San Francisco, Tokyo, and Paris, so like some of the three most expensive cities in the world. We spent a lot on rent and internet and security and snacks and all that stuff. And now we don't have any of those offices, but we still have a responsibility to make sure that our employees have a healthy and productive work environment. But rather than providing that at the office, we just take the money that we used to spend on rent on facilities, and now we call it distributed facilities. We just give that money to everyone. It comes out right now to about $800 per person per month, and people can spend that on whatever they need to make their distributed work environment better. Which could be the membership at the museum or the club, or it could be a bigger apartment, or it could be whatever they want. And that's part of that philosophy. And it really does give you productivity superpowers when the whole team is empowered to do this.
Yeah, $800 a month is quite generous. So that's a really interesting thought experiment.
Well, it's
We
not.
are
I don't think it's generous. I mean, it's what we used to spend on the office, right? No one thought it was generous when that was going into rent and paying security guards. That wasn't generous. That's just what it costs, and so that's still what it costs.
Yeah, great point. So we are here with Newsweek. This is our weekly interview show, Better. We're talking with Phil Libin. He is the head of which is a new company born during the pandemic. And we're talking about maintaining company culture when you're hybrid. If you want to learn more about Phil and his business, you can check it out at mmhmm.app. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly conversations, go to dorieclark.com. You can sign up for my newsletter and download some free self-assessments, and you'll get reminders about these great conversations. please feel free to type your questions for Phil into the chat box. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. And this is an invitation to my trusty and wonderful assistant, John, who is joining us. I am actually not able to access the questions today because of some technical difficulties. So if John at any point would like to take responsibility for popping some questions up on the screen for us, you are hereby invited to do so, John. Thank you so much. So, Phil, a related question, as people are asking their thought provoking questions about company culture, about being hybrid and distributed, I would love to hear from you. So, what are your thoughts about culture specifically? How do we make sure that you were mentioning earlier, remote is the wrong word. You said that it sounds isolated. It sounds like the people are excluded in some way. When you think about building a company like Evernote, your past company, versus building what are the chief things that you are doing the same or differently in terms of creating a cohesive company culture?
Well, I think culture. First of all, like I don't think it's a good idea to maintain company culture. I think the whole framing of that discussion, it just feels a little bit out of place. People ask about how, like, well, like, how do we go back to, or how do we preserve our company culture? How do we go back to the company culture? Like, why? Your company culture was like that amazing before. It's something you want to preserve. It's something you want to go back to. Screw your company culture. Like, it was never that great to begin with. Don't think about how to preserve anything, let alone culture. Think about how to make it better. Think about how to go forward. It's not like, how do we preserve our company culture? It should be, how do we want to build our company culture? How do we want to improve it? And whenever life, gives you these massive changes, there's opportunities. It becomes easier to change things, and so it gives you an opportunity to change things for the better. So I don't care what our culture used to be. I don't want to go back to it. It wasn't that great. And ours was probably better than most companies, but it wasn't that great. I'd rather improve it. I'd rather go forward. So as soon as you start looking at the lens, as soon as you start looking through the lens fundamentally conservatively, as fundamentally as a reactionary thing, as a, how do we hold on to something, it's done. You're not an entrepreneur anymore. Entrepreneurship is about embracing the inevitable changes, getting there before everyone else does, figuring out how to make it better, how to make it go forward. So, and not doing it with a sense of loss, not like mourning for what you had that you don't have anymore. Because again, most of that nostalgia for the past wasn't actually because the past was that great. It's just nostalgia. Like nostalgia, you feel nostalgic for things because people always remember happier times than sadder times. So our culture is better than it ever was. It's certainly not perfect yet. There's lots of opportunities for improvement. But the most important thing is that lens. Like, screw your past culture. Doesn't matter what it used to be. Don't try to go back to it. Try to improve it. And almost everything's different between what we did at Evernote and what we're doing now, because it's a different world. At Evernote, I hated video meetings. I pretty much banned people from important meetings. I said, show up in person or don't bother coming. Obviously, I was wrong about that. Obviously, we get far more productivity by shifting things to video, by being asynchronous, by giving people more autonomy, by treating people like adults. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the changes.
Well, it's definitely a big change, and as a society, we've been through huge ones together. I want to just take a detour for a moment, Phil, if you don't mind, to ask you an Evernote related question. Evernote, of course, is a popular app that has enabled people to gather information together and just make sure all of the different streams of things that we come across, that we can capture it and archive it and be able to access it effectively. I am curious, during the pandemic, I think especially, I think many people's sense of overwhelm increased, that we are hit with so much data, so much information, so many things that we have to keep track of. How do you advise people in a world where they're feeling more and more just underwater with all of the content and data and information that we have to keep track of? What are the ways that you do this in your own life, above and beyond, I'm sure, using Evernote? And what is your general perspective for people that are just feeling a little bit up to their eyeballs in the amount of data that's coming at us?
I think, well, in general, my approach to all of this stuff is it's very natural. It's very natural human behavior. I do it all the time. To focus on the problems, to focus on the negatives, and to try to figure out how to make them better. Sometimes just to complain about them. And this makes a lot of sense. In fact, it's easier. There's a well-known negativity bias cognitively. It is much easier to feel smart if you're focusing on the negatives than if you're not. And this is especially true when people are talking. When you have multiple people kind of communicating, everyone tries to show that they're smarter than the previous person, and you just do that a lot more effectively by criticizing, by saying, "Oh, but what about this difficulty? And, oh, and this thing is harder. Oh man, if that goes wrong, it's going to be really bad." It's imagine like you're sitting in a conference room and you ask your team for their opinions about whether or not you should, I don't know, buy this new company or something. Most of the opinions are going to be negative. They're going to be, "Oh, well, what about this problem? What about this problem?" And then the next person is going to try to like also be critical and negative. And this is just common. If you're lean into the positive, you're seeing is a little bit naive. But this is like, and I do it myself all the time, just in my own thinking about things. And so the antidote to this is very simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. There's a big difference between simple and easy. Like it's simple to see what the right answer is. It's hard to actually put into practice. The simple answer is I force myself to start looking at the things that are better, not the things that are worse, and then deciding how to take the things that are better in whatever the environment is, and how to really lean into them. How to take them from better to ridiculously good, to amazing, to superpowers. Without reference, I try to go for hours at a time or days at a time sometimes without thinking about something that's worse and how to fix it. Purely as like a cognitive exercise, as a meditation, as a way to say we actually have more agency than we think when we're trying to improve something that's already pretty good and really make it amazing than when we're trying to claw something back. So, if I feel overwhelmed with whatever it is, too much information or too much data or just the suffering in the world or all of the things that are easy to feel overwhelmed by, the simple meditation is to say, okay, well, but what are the things that are better this year? What are the things that are better in this environment than they ever were? And force yourself to find a couple, even if they're like little silver linings, and then be like, all right, what could we do to take this little silver lining and make it into a giant benefit? And so, the beginning of the pandemic, of course, there's massive suffering, not just in the beginning, still all the way through. But at the beginning, when it was so unexpected for most people, it was just miserable. And working from home was miserable. If you hadn't planned for it, you hadn't planned the right home, your family situation was different, your kids were out of school, people were sick and dying everywhere. Extremely, extremely stressful. But certain things were actually nicer. Very few, but a few. For example, didn't have to commute anymore. That was the first thing. That I like, that I'm like, wow, man, everything sucks. I'm like in shock about how bad the world just got all of a sudden. This would be back in April of 2020. But what's a nice thing? Well, I don't have to waste time commuting. Okay, that's pretty nice. How do we dig into that? How do we get more of that? What if that's true for everyone permanently? I think that's the analysis that I suggest. It's I think of it as rigorous optimism. It's the framing of rigorous optimism is I'm an optimist because I think the world can be made better and will be made better. But I have to be rigorous about it because I think that's only going to be true if I do it, if we do it. It's not, you don't get to sit back and watch the world get better. You have to have the agency and take action to do it. But if you do that, you have a plan, you execute, you double down on things that are working. You really can make everything better. You can be a rigorous optimist.
I love that. I think that's very useful to think about ways that we can lean into what the positives are. I actually have a new book that just came out. It's called The Long Game, and in it I have a concept called strategic patience that I think is very similar. That I am not a fan of just sitting back and waiting for things, or just be patient, but instead having a hypothesis and acting on it, recognizing that it can take a long time. So
exactly.
Yeah, great points there, Phil. I love that. And on a similar point, I know you have actually literally just launched a new app. It is OOO, which stands for out of office. I'm not sure if I should be pronouncing it ooh, or you could tell me the best way to say all the O's together. But yeah. I understand that this is intended to be kind of a virtual water cooler. It's another way to contribute for people having more informal types of conversations. Can you talk a little bit about what it is and why that need has persisted and why it's not being met now?
Yeah, it's so it's pronounced ooh. You got it. And the idea is it's just a way to make easy, casual conversations wherever you are. Right now, it's available on iOS, on iPhones and iPads. So you can call someone on ooh and bring them into your environment and go for a walk together. Like I use it for walking around the art trail here at Crystal Bridges Museum, and I can walk there by myself or with another person in person, and then bring in somebody else on the phone, and they can see what I'm seeing and see myself, and I can see them. I've used it at the rodeo to kind of show people what I'm watching, and they can see the action, and they can see myself, and I can see them all in the same composite image. Or I can visit their place. I can call my mom with it, and pop over, and what she will see and what I will see is the two of us sitting in her actual kitchen talking, instead of like two separate boxes, kind of like you and I are doing now. So it's a way to basically have a simple one-on-one conversations in your real environment, in the other person's real environment, by sort of teleporting back and forth between the two, or in a virtual environment. If you want to do it in front of a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard, so you can both draw and scribble, you can do that. The main idea is, I think, the company that's really going to win at Video 2.0 is going to be the product, the company that can do synchronous and asynchronous together and smoothly move back and forth between the two of them. Decide when are you talking to someone in real time, like we're doing now, and when are you actually communicating asynchronously, sending recordings around and giving feedback and that kind of stuff. And we want to make every part of that really good. And so we have our first product, just which is what I'm using here. You can use it on top of Zoom or any other video platform, like we're doing this way, but we're not actually interacting and using it together like I'm using it. Other people can see me using it, but they're not using it. Ooh is the next step. It's something that we can use together. And we're going to have lots more stuff over the next few weeks to really build the essential, what we think is the essential toolkit for the out of office lifestyle, for the ooh lifestyle, for distributed work.
That's really interesting. And so something, Phil, that I wanted to dig into a little bit. Obviously, your work with ooh, your work with is about making these virtual connections better. But so often for people these days, we find ourselves in situations where we are in back-to-back meetings all day long. People are, I think, in many cases, just feeling burned out by video meetings in general. What are your strategies or guidelines? And this could be at any level. It could be about planning meetings or having fewer meetings or what have you. But how do you think about making meetings in general better for people who feel like, okay, over the past 18 months, I have been subjected to too many meetings, and especially too many badly run meetings?
Yeah. I mean, the only real good thing you can do to meetings is to cancel them. Like the real answer is just have fewer meetings. Cancel your meetings. Cancel as many as possible. Like that's it. You can work around the edges to have better agendas or something, blah blah blah. But really, what we all want to do with meetings is not to have them, or to have far fewer of them. So you got to cancel your meetings. That's what I did. That's what mostly we did at the company. And we just need a process for doing that. I think so that the question is, well, what was the meeting for in the first place? And did you need to have the meeting, or is there a better way to accomplish that thing? This goes back to what I was saying about synchronous and asynchronous, and kind of smartly moving back and forth between them. I have this kind of mental test, which is I call it the mouth test. So if you look at any kind of interaction of people, so you have a bunch of people and there's a conversation going on, and somebody is moving their mouth a lot, and nobody else is, for a few minutes at least. Like one person is moving their mouth and other people are not moving their mouths. That's not a conversation. That's a lecture. Shouldn't be synchronous. Shouldn't be happening in real time. Should be recorded. Should be sent around. Could be watched in much faster than real time. Can have all sorts of fun and amazing ways to do asynchronous content. On the other hand, if you have a few people and somebody is moving their mouth for a few seconds and then somebody else moves their mouth for a few seconds, okay, now that's a conversation that should be happening in real time and synchronously. So the first thing you do is you get rid of 100% of your interactions when one person is moving their mouth and no one else is. And that's probably 80% of meetings. least most of the time, or at least 80% of 80% of meetings. Like most meetings, 80% of the time, it's that. And then there's like maybe like a brief, question and answer. So split those up. So you do the updates asynchronously using is how we do it. We send out recordings. We do everything else synchronously. So I've canceled all of my update meetings. I never have a synchronous discussion now where somebody is updating me or I'm updating somebody else. That's all done asynchronously. And now the only time I talk to people synchronously is when everyone is already on the same page. Everyone knows all the information. We're just having a back and forth. So those are much shorter, much more fun. And I'm saving probably 2.5 hours a day. I mean, I used to average 16 meetings a day.
Wow.
And I've got 2.5 hours free. So I've got about 2.5 hours every day free. And that includes the time that I spend watching updates, because like even with that, I have 2.5 extra hours of day that I don't have anything that I used to have. Plus I'm saving about 2 hours a day not commuting. So it's about 4.5 hours of extra time. Plus I don't have to spend time. I don't have to spend contiguous hours working, because there's no more office hours. There's no more like physical space. I don't have to be like in the same place at the same 12 hours as other people. I can get my work done whenever in pieces of time. So all in, like my work-life balance is ridiculously better than it's ever been. I feel far better and much healthier. It's better than I've ever had. And obviously maybe not obviously, but I think that I'm more productive than ever as well. I mean, we've accomplished a lot, not just me, really the whole company, mostly the whole company has accomplished an amazing amount over the past year in doing this. Now, when I say that like my work-life balance is healthier than it's ever been and more productive than it's ever been, that's only true in the past few months. That wasn't true in the first few months of the pandemic, when everyone's in shock and we're still like unprepared and we're working from home and kids are screaming and like, no one really knows how to do like meetings and we're all on synchronous Zoom calls. So like, yeah, in the beginning it sucked, but now we've had a year and a half, we've like figured out how to structure our lives. So now for the past 6 months, yeah, grip better than ever, significantly better than it was before the pandemic. But obviously we had to go through that period of 6 to 9 months of everything was pretty terrible. And I think some people are still in that mentality. They're still in the early pandemic mentality, not the, what could it be like if they engineer their lives and worked for a company that encourages people to do this and helps people do this.
Yeah, that's such a great point and an interesting observation about the learning curve that we've all had during the pandemic. So we are nearly out of time, but I want to make sure that we probably have time for one more question. And if you have been enjoying this conversation, please hit the like button and the share button so that your friends can benefit from the conversation and the wisdom of Phil Libin as well. He is, of course, the head of mmhmm. You can get it at mmhmm.app, and it is a great new way to enhance your video communication. And if you want to make sure, yeah, that's right. If you want to make sure you never miss one of these conversations, just go to DorieClark.com, sign up for the updates and free self-assessments, and you will be notified about our future guests. So this is a great conversation. Phil, I am curious. The last thing that I would love to get your insights about, and I'm sure our viewers would as well, you have obviously put a lot of time and thought into the question of leadership during the pandemic, leadership during a hybrid / distributed workforce. If there were other leaders watching this that are trying to navigate this hybrid universe that we're all figuring out, what would be the best tips or insights that you have? What are the perhaps either lessons learned, mistakes you made early on, or things that you're doing now that you feel like are really key that you would advise others to follow?
All I've really tried to do is work with people building the products that we wish existed in the world, like building the world that we wish were here, and just every day just work with people who are much smarter, much better, much more able than I am. Keep them together, add new people like that all the time, and work on making the things that we wish existed. And realize, sometimes pretend that we actually can do it, that we actually have agency to do it, that this is not a hopeless endeavor, that we can push forward, we can make the kinds of things that we wish existed in the world. And so the thoughtfulness about it really just comes with thinking about, well, what do we wish existed in the world? Which is different than complaining about what we don't like in the world. Like, it's easy to complain, it's easy to criticize, and very often important, but it's different. It's a lot harder. It doesn't take much imagination to complain, to point out problems. It takes a lot of imagination to envision what you wish would be the case instead. And then go from there, actually make a plan to, to accomplishing them and to doing them. So I think the only like real tip is right now is the so I grew up. I was born in what used to be the Soviet Union. Russia used to be a city used to be called Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. I was a little kid. I was 8 years old when I came over with my parents to the U.S. as refugees back in 1979. I went to school in what was the Soviet Union, and I remember hearing a bunch of random quotes from you know Soviet founders and so on. And there's a quote that I remember that really stuck with me, which is probably apocryphal. Probably never even said this. It was attributed to Lenin, and he said allegedly, sometimes decades go by and not much happens, and then weeks go by and decades happen. And that's what we're living through right now. Like right now, this is the changiest the world has ever been that I've ever lived through in my lifetime. Like decades are happening every week. Decades of change are happening all the time. And that's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's scary. The vast majority of people instinctively resist it. They fall back on nostalgia. They fall back on trying to restore what they used to have. I feel the same way. That is an entirely human way to feel. But the power move is to feel that way, but not act that way. But like force yourself to, instead of trying to hold back the change, to run at it, to dance with it, to say, okay, everything is changing. It's actually the most opportune time to make the world change in a better direction and to embrace it rather than trying to hold it back. So never try to conserve anything in terms of culture or work or whatever. Always try to change it and change it for the better.
Amazing. Dance with a change, everyone. That is the word from Phil Libin. He is the creator of mmhmm. And again, you can check it out at mmhmm.app. Phil, it is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Take care.